I am a temple who walks the earth. My womb is fertile for giving birth. I am a woman planted in truth. I grow my branches from sacred roots. You are the form of who you want to be. So come untethered, your soul is free. We're here to heal, we're here to thrive. We are a dream who's come alive. We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An evolution for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. 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 For God's sake.
Hello, Essence. This is Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. It's good to be back with you. We took last week off for some integration and play, and we're back. We're back this week. And gosh, I have really been so, I don't know if it was really a break. It was in some ways. It was a break from the radio show and from magic school and from most of the things I regularly do. And for me, it was a deep foray into becoming and playing. After the show 2 weeks ago on the Sacred Temple of Becoming, I ended up manifesting beautiful experiences in real life sacred temples and had the opportunity to just be with the most amazing essences and see the beauty of how when we each bring the uniqueness of our own flavor to the temple, the magic that can happen, and to be in this space with these women who, basically what we're going to be doing here on the show today is a microcosm of, what's happening in this larger scale. And, what it looked like is these very diverse, eclectic women coming together with no plan and no agenda and just being together. And in the beingness, some things happened. Plans were made and visions were had and alliances were formed and memories were brought forth. And, and none of it was scheduled and none of it was designed. And it was so beautiful. And there was spaciousness and art and inspiration and femininity and, divinity. And it was just magical. So, we play with that. We play with that here. We talk about it. And it's just always so refreshing when it is actually embodied, because I feel like that's the stage we're in with our evolution is, the thought forms and the ideas have been being floated for a while. And now it's time to actually step forward into doing the things we're talking about, jumping off the cliff with no parachute and seeing what can occur when we just allow ourselves to fully be. And noticing the magic that occurs within and around that. And so today, I had already scheduled for my beautiful friend, Liz DiAlto, to be here with us today. And of course, it's perfect because, here we are. She's one of my favorite friends to play with in the realm of we don't have to have a plan. So we can just show up, and we have literally zero pre-rehearsed. I have not one thing written down. I don't even know the topic or the direction of where we might go today. And all of that is so perfect. It's so perfect. So I appreciate you showing up, even though you don't know where you might be led, and trusting that there's some medicine that will be here for you in whatever spirit ends up moving through and between all of us. So I want to say just a little bit about Liz before I bring her on. Liz and I met in the New Icon experience that we did with Laura Hollick about a year ago. It actually was almost exactly a year ago. And it was wild because I didn't know anything about her, and she didn't know anything about me. And when we showed up there, we immediately were like, oh yeah, you, like I see you, you're another one of me, you know? And when we finally started to talk about what we do, I think she introduced her company first and said, I have this company, it's called Wild Soul Movement. And I just laughed and I said, yeah, I do a radio show called Wild Soul Medicine. And she was like, what? And so we had such a good chuckle about that. And it's one of my favorite stories to tell because, you know, there's so much of this online competition, you know, where people are like, you use my words or you use my thing, or, you know, I've talked about it on the show before. And Liz is that woman. Liz is the woman where, you know, she is so embodied in who and what she is. And I'm so embodied in who and what I am that neither of us felt threatened. You know, there wasn't anything like, oh, she stole my stuff, or, you know, I can't share me with her. Like, here she is on my radio show and I've been on her podcast. And, you know, because what I want to demonstrate for you is how it's not about the words. So when Liz fully brings who she is and I fully bring who I am, the words are kind of irrelevant. Like, there is a theme and there is a similarity in the memos we've been getting from the universe. And we bring our own uniqueness to that. And so it's all so good. And that's truly what they mean when they say, like, if you just be you, there is no competition. So I adore Liz. She is like me, and she's also very much herself and very unique and bold and brash. One of my favorite things about her introduction that she says is, if Danielle Laporte and Shakira had a love child with Mae West, it would be Liz DiAlto. And I think that's so good. She's a raw and honest woman who is all about body love, and she has a really unique approach to, you know, she's not the traditional, like, you know, you should eat well and exercise kind of woman. She's very much about let's do what feels good, and does it in her own unique way. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to my friend, Liz DiAlto. Hey, Liz.
I love that. I love that intro, and I love that story.
It never gets old, does it?
No, and then, well, the other part that makes it extra, like, double hilarious is that I had always assumed your website was jodyengland.com. Mm-hmm. And then when I reached out to you to interview you for the podcast, which is called Untamed the Wild Soul Woman, and realized your website was Untamed You, I was like, you got to be kidding me.
I know, right?
So awesome.
I know. I was just in in ceremony space this weekend with a woman that was talking about her, you know, new program that she's leashing, and she and I have many similarities. And, you know, and I was like, yeah, I used to have a program called that same thing, you know. It was like, yeah, one synchronicity after another. So
that's cool.
Mm-hmm. I actually find that affirming. I find it affirming when many of us are getting the same memo and we haven't been checking in with each other. It's like, okay, great. So this is, you know, because it's what's up on the planet. It is time for wild soul everything.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. I feel like it's just like cool. Like, we're on the same team. And I'm also not a big believer, and I know you agree with this. I'm not a big believer in ownership. Mm-hmm. Honestly, like, the idea picked me, and, you know, for as long as it wants to stay with me, I will share it with the world. And, I just don't really believe in this is mine, you know?
Agree. I know. I actually, when I first launched my Wild Soul Medicine Radio, I had a friend who uses some similar terminology in her work, and she didn't love it. You know, and I said, you know, the funny thing is, I didn't actually choose the name. Like, the shamans that I was working with put it together, and it chose me. And and I feel the same. Like, that ownership piece, I get it. I get it from an ego perspective. And actually, recently there was a woman that used the same branding coach that I did. And she's not only a branding coach, she's more of a shaman. And she came out with the same. So she had Untamed something, you know, as her website. And I didn't feel like she was embodying it. And it did feel like she was actually, copying. And so I did say something to that, more from a space of like, I'm not sure you're all the way there with what's you. you know?
Right.
And you can keep it if you want, but I'm just saying, you know? And I think that we're all like that, you know, like what if we could just come at it from a loving place of like, yeah, you know, yeah, I see you, or yeah, I don't know if that's really you. And so, you know, let's reflect that and see where we get.
Yeah, because I even remember, what year was this? This was 2010, so 5 years ago, when I was first starting my brand. You know, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I would use other people's stuff as templates or as inspiration and just be like, all right, well, this is how you do it. Cause I just didn't know any better, but then just use my own words. And there's even, it's so funny. It's funny how we don't take ownership, but other people like want to take ownership for us, because there are a lot of things called Wild Soul, and I'll get tagged or people will send me something and be like, have you seen this girl? And there's actually a girl right now. I won't name the brand, but she uses some similar language, and a couple people have sent me her stuff. And when I look at her things, I actually see elements of my things and a couple other my friends who do similar work. And I'm like, great. It's the beginning of her business. And, you know, over the course of the next few years, after like taking inspiration, there's a book I've never read, but it's called Steal Like an Artist. I think that's what she's doing. And I think it's great. At a certain point, it'll be much more her, and it won't be so obvious that she's borrowing from elements of other people's things. But what the heck, like, who cares, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that conversation. I did the same thing when I started my business. I didn't have money for a branding coach or a business coach. And so I was like, yeah, let me see how she does it, and I'll use my elements. And yeah, absolutely. And actually one of my dreams is that I feel like, as you know, because that old way of being able to template market, I think, is beginning to be on the way out. And, you know, eventually you will just have to be yourself. Like that is the commodity, and that is how we will transact and exchange with life. And so, you know, what I envision is a future where you can't tell what lineage someone came from or who they studied from or who they paid to be their business coach, you know, that would be amazing.
That's so funny. I love that you use the word lineage, because it's so true. Like, I come from the B school world with Marie Forleo, where, you know, everyone's website just looks like some kind of other version of Marie's website. Yeah. And even when we were creating Wild Soul Movement, that was a big thing. I actually said to my creative director, I'm unsubscribing from everything. The only thing I looked at for inspiration during my branding was this series of videos that Beyonce had on YouTube that was about the process that she went through to release that album. This was December of 2013. So that album, remember the one where she just dropped it, nobody knew it was coming?
Yep.
There's this really amazing video series on YouTube. And it wasn't even so much the branding aspect of it, but her messaging of being like, this was me coming into my womanhood and just going with my instincts, and even having these moments of being like, oh man, if my mom sees this, she's going to freak out. And I'm like, no shit, Beyonce still thinks like that too? Great.
Exactly.
That was all. It was so much more like what you said. Really, the only thing any of us have anymore in this world to stand out, if we're in any kind of business, is to be ourselves. Because there's just so much of the same. And so all that matters, I mean, I think if you're really committed to the message and the healing, like a lot of us are, and the contribution to the collective, I mean, I don't care whether it's me or someone else, just for the love of God, do something to feel better or do something differently to change or transform.
Yeah, I did exactly the same process when I was putting together Untamed You. I unsubscribed from everything. I didn't listen to anything. And I largely still do that. Like, I really, I don't really like to read other people's stuff because I don't want to be influenced by what other people are up to. And then, you know, just in myself, I feel more in integrity with what I'm up to. And, you know, I think that actually has a metaphor for our lives, too, that I think we're all just beginning to get that, right? So it's kind of hitting the business world first. And then on the heels of that is this, is the personal level. Like, how do I be myself, and how do I find my way into what's truly me? You know, because it's like, I think business is the inside out job, right? So you unsubscribe and you put yourself out there, but you have to really know yourself. So let's talk about that. What has that journey been like for you?
Oh, so great. You know, back, it's so funny because I just recorded a podcast episode yesterday about the evolution of my business and my money story. And kind of similarly to what you just alluded to, it's all the same, right? The better I know myself, the better my business is going to be. And that's been for sure very true with Wild Soul Movement, because ultimately I decided, let me create a business around being able to completely be myself. Because if I do that, nothing will ever be forced. And there will just be very little in my day-to-day of having to do anything I don't want to do. Like, of course, before we came online, you and I were talking about how we're not technology people. So there's always going to be, some software and programs and stuff like that we have to deal with. But in terms of the creativity and the expression, it's just so great. Even the other weekend, I run these weekends called Untame Yourself Weekends. And I woke up early in the morning before the first day, and I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing feeling. I don't have to prepare anything because I just need to show up, kind of like we showed up to the show. I don't need to plan. Like, I have a general idea of what the framework might be, but I can't actually know until I get the women in front of me who are going to be here, and I can feel into what feels right, what feels appropriate, what feels needed. So for me, I had to really learn all the rules so I could break them. And that was in business, that was in fitness, that was in health, that was in sex. It was literally in everything, right? I was raised Catholic, and the big impetus for me, for sure, happened in February of 2011. At that time, I was actually in Marie Forleo's mastermind, and it was called Adventure Mastermind. So every retreat we had, which there were 3, she had planned some kind of adventure. So for the first one, the adventure was a boudoir photo shoot. And so it was such an incredible experience to be seen that way, such a raw and vulnerable experience. I had never taken any type of picture in lingerie, let alone naked or anything like that. And so I wanted to write a blog about the experience. And at the time, where I was personally and where my relationship was with my family, I called my mom to give her a heads up because I didn't want her to freak out when she saw the picture that I was going to post on my website. And I knew she would see it because my mom's adorable. And at the time, she was literally like printing out my blog posts and saving them in a folder.
Oh my gosh. How sweet is that?
So sweet. She's so amazing. However, she was not feeling it. She freaked out and really took it so, the Bible says women are supposed to be modest and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, we just weren't connecting. She wasn't understanding that this wasn't about exposing myself. This wasn't about getting attention. It wasn't about needing to get any kind of external validation or approval. It was literally about sharing the story of being with my own body. And the experience of looking at a photo of myself and feeling like, wow, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And then immediately feeling shame for being so proud of myself, which in and of itself, so many things baked into that experience began the journey of really unfolding. Because ultimately I told myself, oh, I'm just going to give her a heads up. But I was asking permission.
Sure.
And when she freaked out, it was like 4 days of fighting and it was ugly. I didn't do it. I didn't post it. And it actually took me another 32 months to post that blog, which I finally did in October of 2013. So the blog is called Getting Naked and Falling in Love. And when I eventually posted it, I didn't even tell her. I just posted it. And it was a big deal, and she was upset, but something about it, we've worked a lot on our relationship. She just dealt with it. And, my little brother would tell me, because he still lives at home with my parents, every once in a while, my mom would just be like, did your sister still have that fucking picture on her website? And at one point, I actually even put it on the homepage, and I think that was like a little bit of a passive-aggressive rebellion on my part. But that was also when I was transitioning from being DiAlto.com to Wild Soul Movement, and I was over the old fitness stuff, and I really wanted at least a glimpse of where I was going and what was important to me to be, represented on the homepage. So through that, there was a lot of exploration around, working in versus working out, especially as a fitness person. Like, whose rules was I adhering to? And there were so many incredible books along the way that really helped me to come home to myself. books like Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, even Mama Gina's book, The School of the Womanly Arts, Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. And then the ones that really, really hit it home for me were Sonia Choquette's Ask Your Guides, because one of the things that was a challenge for me over those years was coming out of religion. I hadn't really been a practicing Catholic for quite a while, but I wasn't clear on what my relationship to the divine was. I didn't know how to communicate with the divine. I didn't know what I believed in or have enough of a framework to feel comfortable or consistent with it. And even at that point, mentions of Jesus or God in certain contexts would really trigger me. Whereas now I love Jesus. I love everything Mary Magdalene. And I love reading all the stories and all the texts around that. But the other three, so Ask Your Guides by Sonia Choquette, because I'd always felt things I didn't even know. It's so interesting. I love, and I know you use this term a lot, remembering. Actually remembering, being able to remember back and be like, oh, you know what? I've always been fascinated with Mary Magdalene, because growing up Catholic, I'd always be so curious, like, who's that other Mary? Like, why are they so mean to her? And that curiosity was always there. I just didn't know. And then there's a woman named Tosha Silver. Have you ever heard of her?
I have not heard of her.
It's this great book called Outrageous Openness, How to Let the Divine Take the Lead. And, you know, for a lot of people who listen to your show, I would imagine they're probably pretty far along on their spiritual path. So I don't know, Tosha's book might feel a little simplistic, but at the time for me, it was everything. And I think because it's simplistic is why I still even go back to it, to just always remember, to just like surrender, ask for help, and then be ready to receive it. And then also the book Red Hot and Holy by Sarah Beek.
My favorite. We've talked about that book many times on this show.
It's
the guidebook.
And I recently reread it. And it was so interesting to reread it now versus the first time I read it in October of 2013 and to see what I got out of it. It was super, super interesting. So a lot of those types of things. And then also just incredible connections and conversations with people who you do, right? Like, kind of like you said, it wasn't even a remembering, it was a recognition when I met you at the new icon thing. I remember at one point being out on like the porch and like just crying, being like, I don't know why I like you so much.
Yep.
Sweet.
So sweet. I know. I mean, as you're telling your story, I'm like, are we the same person?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Yeah, all of those same stories. I've been talking about my mom, and you know, the last several weeks, last 6 weeks or so, I've been on healing our mother wounds, and it's really brought up a lot. In fact, I'm pretty sure my mom, I didn't think she ever listened to the show, but now I'm pretty sure she has listened to that show because things have gotten a little cold. And I talked to my dad last week, and he didn't say anything, but he was really short. And I was like, oh, fuck. All right. I'm going to have to clean something up here.
Yeah.
But I had the same experience with like when my website came out, and, you know, my mom's super religious too. And the whole, you know, triggered even by me doing a Wayne Dyer quote post where it's, you know, talking about being a sorceress, as in like, you know, attached to source. And, you know, then I got all of the devil emails, and I'm possessed and something has hold of me. And, you know, and I'm trying to like prepare her like, and by the way, a website's going to come out where I look like a sorceress. And I also like talk about, you know, being totally radically free, and you're going to hate every bit of it. And I don't really want your feedback. And so I think, you know, what I love for people hearing about this is because when you see someone really in essence, you know, it can be like, I think it's disconcerting because you're thinking like, how can I get from this life where I have all these constraints and these stories and these things I have to be and do? And how can I stop doing that to just be completely free the way that you look, right? And so the assumption can be somehow it's easy, or, you know, we had less to come out of in order to get here. And I just think it's really good for people to hear like, no, it's always scary and painful. And then underneath that, there's the certainty of like, but it's who I am,
right?
You know?
And you know, what's been so beautiful is that it has taken some time for sure, but I've totally been able to come to a place with my mom where neither one of us necessarily is super attached anymore to being understood. I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. I don't necessarily know that I believe fully in unconditional love. Mm-hmm. However, what I really believe in is unconditional acceptance. I do not have to agree with you to be able to fully accept you and be like, cool, that's how you roll. This is how I roll. I get to love you a lot anyway. And those things don't have to be what we connect on. And this is something I've realized, as we grow, as we're on this path and on this journey, I think one of the really sad parts that I notice sometimes for myself, I don't always necessarily even give myself full time to grieve, but then it comes up and it gets triggered and I'm like, oh man, like it's very sad that we really do outgrow people. And when I say outgrow, there's no level in that, right? Like where I am is no better than where anyone else is. It's just different. And there's a lot of people who we no longer feel like we can connect with. And the thing I realized is maybe I can't connect with these people from where I am around the things that I would really like to connect around. However, I can still connect with these people on, in some cases, the very few things we still do share in common, right? So my little brother, for example, we're super different, but the thing that we share the most is our sense of humor. So he's the person who, when I need to just be my most unevolved self and just talk some shit or say some really non-PC things, I can always take that to my little brother. And he is the safe space for that. And that's where we connect. Like my mom, she always wants to talk a lot about like what's going on at her work. And she has a high stress job. So lots of times it's just not space and not language that I would prefer to spend time in. But you know what? I can listen to my mom for a few minutes, talk about whatever, and just let her be her damn self, because that's what I want from people. So that's something that I've been playing around with lately, the idea that I don't need people to be who I want them to be. I can find ways to connect with them exactly where they are, from exactly where I am, without either one of us having to compromise. It's just perhaps around specific things. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And I think it's a beautiful inquiry. I'm in a similar one. And I feel like what I've attracted with my mom is particularly volatile because there's some reason I need to learn, this line between how can I be with you if you're trying to convert me or judge me or, and so there's like this playing with being with or boundary or, what do we do with all of that? Right.
Yeah.
And do I want to be in relationship with you? And do I have to be in relationship with you? And
that's another thing.
Yeah. All of that.
I've set tons of boundaries with my mom. And again, she's so great. She just surprises me all the time with how she will eventually meet me, but on her own time and in her own way. So back, again, 2013 was around when I started setting these boundaries, but it was in a much more hostile way of like, I'm just not talking to you about this. And then we would both suffer because there was this tension. And she'd be like, well, I can't ask you about this because you have all these rules now. And I'm like, they're not rules, they're boundaries. But eventually, we've just adjusted and gotten used to it. And, I think something that helped, so I don't know if this is going to be helpful for anyone listening, but just at some point, I asked, like, what was her biggest concern? And her biggest concern, being Catholic, is just, she wants to spend eternity in heaven with her family. And I'm like, cool. Well, here's what I'll say on that. I might not be Catholic anymore. However, I feel closer to God than I've ever felt in my life. I am in constant communication with the divine. And I said to her, how could it be possible for all these incredible things to be coming into my life and happening all the time if I wasn't completely supported and I didn't have a relationship with God? And I think that really hit home for her, because it was like, listen, we practice differently, but essentially we believe in the same source. And the other this was sweet. This was probably the sweetest recognition or moment. The last time I was home, I have this Mary Magdalene oracle deck that I love. And my mom had come into my room and she picked it up and she goes, tell me how this isn't sacrilegious. and I said, sure, like, here, just look at it. Look at the pictures. Look how beautiful they are. Like, can you look at that and feel like you can get some kind of message or inspiration in any way? I said, and look, like, flip through the book, none of the explanations are actually referencing anything to relate to any kind of religion. And she said, oh, because my mom has this practice where she feels like when she feels like she needs guidance around anything, she'll just flip to a random page in the Bible, and whatever scripture she lands on, she'll take that as the message she needed.
Yep.
And she says, oh, this is kind of just the same as when I flip through the Bible, huh? And I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was just so awesome in that moment to be like, that's exactly right. We have different methods, but it's the same shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. My friend taught me that method. She called it Bible dipping.
Yeah.
Yep. And I do it on my iPod all the time. You know, I just like flip through the songs like, okay, play me a song, universe. And it's always the perfect thing. Yeah. You know, and I love all of that. And you know, in some ways that's exactly where I'm at with my mom, except for she hasn't been open to it. Right. So so I offer those things and then she's closed. And I feel like it's like she's definitely playing a role for me this lifetime, where her constant closed stance forces me more into essence, right? It forces me more into discerning, like, okay, who am I really, and why am I doing this? And I actually just had a huge past life awareness a couple weekends ago, where like I've always known that we've had these past lives where I was the wild one and she was the conservative one, and then I had this awareness of a past life where I was the conservative one, where I was actually like the town leader, and I was this very religious woman, and I had all this power, and this woman she was like kind of beginning to lead a revolt against me, and so I basically orchestrated it so she got in trouble and she got put in the stockade, and then she got stoned to death. And it was my mother.
Oh God.
She wasn't my mother in that life, but it was the soul of my mother who was playing the wild one. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh my gosh. And of course I hated it, right? Because like I've seen all these other lives where I've, you know, used my power in not good ways, and I'm totally cool with that. But like being the pious religious one, I was like, Pat, no.
That's so funny. It's not it's not that the soul of your mom got stoned to death that you were upset about. It was that you were a pious religious figure.
Yes. Isn't that great? Yeah.
I'm with you.
I know. Funnier than that, one of my students was here. And we were noticing these past lives, one where she's been like a student of mine many lifetimes. And there was one lifetime where, you know, she just like laid her head at my feet, and I cut her head off. Right.
Oh God.
And we learned the lesson of it, right? The lesson is for her to not give away her power and for me to not take her power. And also we were just joking, right? Because it's like, I said, why did you make me cut your head off? That was so difficult for me. Why did I have to do that?
That is amazing.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm still in the process of learning the lessons of like, how do I honor her on that path? Or is it up to me to change her or reflect to her or, you know, or be out of relationship with her, or like, what do I do with her? You know? So in the meantime, I just keep doing with me, and that's what I've got so far.
I had a situation last summer, actually, again, right around this time last year, because it was around Father's Day, that we got into a fight about something, and it was just the years of accumulating how she talks to me, how she talks to my dad, how she talks to my brother sometimes. And I was like, you know what? You're the only person in my life who talks to me like this, and it's actually not okay. Mm-hmm. You don't get a free pass because you're my mom. So I just need a break. And I didn't talk to her for like 3 weeks, which was like torture for her because she doesn't really deal with disharmony very well. And neither do I, but I just knew I needed space because I knew there was nothing I could possibly say that was going to be true, first of all, right? Like when emotions are so raw and you're so hurt and so angry, nothing coming out is true.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't interested in sharing things that she wouldn't be able to unhear, that she could probably take personally, until I actually knew like what I wanted and what was clear for me.
Yes. And
as tough as it was, and as many text messages from her that I was getting that I was being cold and cruel and whatever, that she had a stomach ache, I'm like, you know, I'm working with a coach now, this really amazing man who is incredible. And one of the things he says is the greatest freedom we have in this life is to allow other people to have their own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And this process of becoming comfortable with other people's discomfort in the moments when I'm really standing true to myself has been like a constant lesson over the last year, and a really valuable, probably one of the most valuable lessons of my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Viv and I were just talking about that lesson this morning. That piece of like, because it's insidious where, it's built into our personalities. There's always some level of like, I need to fix you, so it's okay to be me, you know, or I need to save you, so it's okay to be me, or some version of that. And I think what we're really all being called into this lifetime is lose the loop. We don't need that external loop. It's just time to be us,
Exactly right.
And then when we start doing that, then they get to be them, and then everybody's happy, and then there's peace on earth,
And for people who might not be in it, it sounds like the most outrageously selfish thing in the world by like our culture and our programming and societal standards. But when you are in it and when you're practicing it, you begin to see how it's the most absolutely loving thing you could possibly do for yourself and for anyone else. I was talking to a friend yesterday. She's been divorced for quite a while, but she recently moved about 90 minutes away from the town where her and her ex were living, and they have an 8-year-old together. And so they were needing to renegotiate some stuff because the visitation is a little different now that there's a 90-minute drive involved. And she's working with a woman who is just coaching her around creating exactly what she wants to happen. And so she'll get these emails and these messages from the ex-husband with lawyers and all these questions and all these details. And the woman who's helping her with the creation of it was like, okay, you don't have to answer this. Here's the one line that matters because that's what you want. She's like, you don't put any energy or attention towards anything else. It feels, even as someone who practices things like that, it still feels quite radical.
It is. I mean, that's why it's edge of the paradigm. It really is the beginning of the dawn of the new age, right? And so it's very radical for those of us that are taking these first steps out because we don't see it done. And it's like, what does that even mean? And, when we were telling our stories at the beginning about modeling ourselves, I was trying to think of if there was anyone that I had seen who was just in their essence and their business. And it's like, no, there wasn't any. There still are very, very few, And so I do think it does require space. Like it requires space from unplugging from the people around you so you can feel yourself. And then it requires some re-engagement with those people to try on, those reflections and what's true and what's not true. So I think it's definitely both. Like you have to give yourself the in time so that when you come out, you have a sturdier foundation to know who you are, right?
Yeah, totally. And I noticed, I love all the ways in which we get tested. So it sounds like right now your mom is like testing the hell out of you. I've been there's just like a handful of people over the last several months who the only way I can describe it is they're just like continuously come back and poke me. It's a few women who will reach out to me about something, and it's just so clear that they are just like projecting their stuff all over me, good and bad, right? It's like they're just putting their power on me, they're putting their judgments on me, and I'm just not taking it. I'm not taking it on, and I'm not engaging with it. And I think that's one of the reasons why it still keeps coming back, because it just keeps testing me more and more. Like, you don't engage in that, Liz. Like, it's not yours. You're not going to pick this up and run with it. It's not your job to make these people feel better. Like, they get to feel however they feel. They get to send you these unsolicited messages about how you've triggered them. Like, great. I'm so glad they're in self-inquiry, and it's not my job. It's not my job to help, because they're not actually asking for help. They're just wanting to like dump their shit all over me.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's just a clear test, because I'm always like, all right, well, if this is happening, and it's not that often, it's actually just like 2 or 3, but it's happened enough times for me to be like, all right, well, who's the common denominator here? It's me. And is this something I need to look at, or is it just a test? And I really think it's been a big, big, big test, because I talk about and I teach boundaries all the time.
Yep.
And I teach staying in your own experience. And that's big. Actually, my word going into this year was responsibility. in the context of personal responsibility and not jumping into other people's experiences. Because I think even especially when you have a business, even though people pay us money for services and coaching and experiences and things like that, it's still not my job. Like I can give you the content, I can run the calls, I can run the intensive weekends, and it's still going to be their responsibility what they do with all of it.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I agree with all of that 100%. And I do the same. I work those pokes from both sides. So there's my side always first, which is what's my medicine in this, and boundaries that has been up for me as well too. Like, what do I do with all of these projections? Because as somebody who's doing something that hasn't really been done, you know, you're definitely visible in a certain way, and you're certainly attracting backlash from the old paradigm. So, okay, what needs to happen around that? And what is it in me that's a match to that? And how are they reflecting a part of me that still isn't comfortable with my essence or still isn't in peace with myself, right? So we got to do all of that for sure. And then, you know, there's this place where it's like, and we talked about this a few weeks ago too, but it's like, I love you and I'm not going to let you hurt me. Right. Yes. So here's a boundary, or here's some space that I require, or I'm done having that inquiry with you right now, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not a game of perfect. It's certainly not like, oh, handled, I'm in essence, and now, you know, everything's good.
Handled.
I'm
good.
So glad I found myself.
Yeah, so this mother stuff is so interesting. Something I say a lot is like daddy issues gets a lot of airtime, but the mother stuff is just as, if not more intense in a lot of ways for men and women.
It really is, you know, and I did not want that to be the case. Like my whole life, I've always eschewed all of the old truisms, like, you know, you can't trust women friends, or women are more emotional or dramatic than men, and that, you know, the mother-daughter relationship is hard. It's like all of that. I was like, oh, that's bullshit. That's not me. And, you know, and now that I finally tapped into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there is so much in the mother wound. There really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and I want to hear about relationships too. So I'm interested because I know you have a hot man.
I do.
And you have this, you know, beautiful new relationship, and, you know, a conscious man, right? Which many of our women are like in the process of attracting the one. So I would love to hear anything you want to share about, like, you know, what's it like to be with Mr. Wonderful?
Oh my God, this is so many layers. I actually did on my podcast, I alternate doing interviews with doing Ask Liz episodes where I field a question, and someone had asked a question: what is it like being in a quote evolved relationship? So first, let me just say that I hate all of the language.
I know.
Evolved partnership, conscious relationship, because it all just feels like ways to put on labels and judgments that evolve into expectations and whatever. So yeah, the answer is I'm super fortunate that I met a man who we are traveling along the same path. And I think that's the description I feel comfortable with. We are traveling along the same path, curious and evolving in the same areas. And I know I've been in relationships where we're both growing, but we're just growing in different areas and different topics. We're curious in different things. So it's cool because a lot of the inquiries that I'm in constantly, he is in the same ones for himself, which is really awesome. So I will say this, though. It's like a crucible. It is not it's not easy. People, I think that's why that woman had asked me that question for that podcast episode, because – and I've seen a couple really hilarious, actually, posts about this online recently, about people talking about an evolved partner or wanting a conscious man, and how a lot of it is women on a spiritual high horse going, why can't anybody meet me?
Yep.
And several months ago, I was teaching at an event where a woman asked a question like similar to that. I feel like no one can ever meet me, or no one can handle me. And Nicole Daedone, the founder of One Taste, she wrote this book called Slow Sex. She said, well, here's what I feel about that. I am a force, and there's not a person on this planet who can't handle me as long as I am willing to be handled.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a similar conversation to that with, do you know Eva Clay?
I know the name. I don't know her personally.
She's great. I met her at an event back in January, similarly, right? And so a lot of it comes to, am I willing to be handled? And am I letting him in? And am I also giving him his own space? So a couple weeks ago, we have 2 bedrooms in our place, and I moved into the guest room. And it's so, again, like counterculture, we assume sleeping in separate rooms means bad things. It's like the best thing that ever happened for us, because I just became aware that I needed my own space. I've always had my own space. I've been independent for a really long time. And I'm like, oh my God, if I just move into that room, maybe I could just sleep by myself a couple nights a week, or just like have my own space, and also give him his own space, right? That he's not living in this room with my stuff everywhere, like. So I call it, the king's room and the queen's quarters, and we love it. Oh my God, we love it because we both work from home. So I think one of the things, regardless of consciousness, that is helpful in relationship is space. And this is something that Esther Perel talks about. Desire needs space and intimacy wants closeness. So we had so much intimacy, but we were really not having much desire for each other because we're just around each other all the friggin' time. So, to even just sleep on our own some nights. And Mike said this a couple weeks ago to someone, I forget who. He's like, yeah, but it's amazing because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I yearn for her. Like I miss her, instead of every morning waking up and being like, it's you again.
Yes.
So a lot of the exploration has been very much around me being able to be me, him being able to be him, putting our own needs first, and then coming together as a team. So there's like 3 entities in the relationship. There's Liz, there's Mike, and then there's the team.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I've been married for 18 years, and my husband and I have had such an evolution of, at times we've been on the same path, and then we've been on wildly different paths. And then, now we're on a beautiful same path together and really beginning this deep exploration of our relationship. And I think inquiry is so important. It's so important because everybody goes through motions, and it's so easy to go to sleep, right? Like, this is what I've seen, or this is what I've known. This is how my parents did it. And this is what a relationship is supposed to look like or be like. But mostly most of what we're doing is bullshit, right? Because nobody's been conscious. So,
and how's that working out for us, society?
Exactly.
Look at the divorce rates. Look at the amount. Like, Mike does work with men, and just the number of men who cheat on their wives or their girlfriends is outrageous. The number of women who are settling or thinking they can't leave a marriage because of money. Like, so all those traditional formats of relationship or models for relationship have gotten us to a place where there's so many people suffering in situations that they really don't want to be in.
Yes. Yeah. And I think these 2 things play hand in hand, because I was just feeling into, in a certain way, your and my soul paths were the same. And so we lend ourselves to breaking rules, breaking paradigms. We're very self-contained. It's in some ways easier for us to question or do things outside of the norm. So it's just feeling into like, what would other people need in order to do this? And I feel like it's both. So it's like, as you start to do your self-exploration, as you get more clear about your essence, then it creates freedom to take steps that serve you, right? Rather than this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then vice versa, when you create space outside of yourself, right? When you say like, I'm going to stop listening to all of these other people so I can hear myself, then you create room for like, okay, here I am in my relationship and I don't actually feel like sleeping next to my boyfriend right now. So what I'd like to do instead is sleep over there, but you can't hear that if you're plugged into everything else.
That's exactly right. And something that was really important for us. So I had never lived with anyone before. He hadn't lived with someone for many years. Oh my God. It was so quiet here. And then all of a sudden they started mowing lawns and stuff outside. So I really hope it's just loud to me and not loud for you and everyone listening.
Yeah, it's not loud here. You're good.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. So, and that made me lose my train of thought for a second. What had I started to say?
You would start to say about sleep. I said about hearing yourself. So if you can know, you don't want to sleep next to your boyfriend.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we moved in together, there were a lot of concurrent transitions happening. Mike was coming out of being a nomad. He'd been traveling full time for almost 3 years straight. It was like 31 months or something like that. And I had been just like single and working, and I had never lived with a partner before, and I've always been super independent. So when we moved in, the first couple months were actually rough. Like there was a lot of love there, but man, it's like we dove into the fire. And in the course of like 3 to 6 months, really took on so much old programming, so many things. And, you know, he has a lot of stuff too, because he was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So there's a lot of actual brainwashing that he's unraveling, because that is really an intense cult. So there's just so much stuff that was like the perfect storm of, oh my God, I see why you're my partner, but wow, I can't believe how much we're working on together right now. And one of the things that at a certain point I realized was, other than each other, who are we going to for support? And let's be really conscious about asking for advice only from people who have what we want or some semblance of what we want. Because it doesn't make sense to take relationship advice from people who do not have what you want.
Yes.
It just doesn't. And in a lot of cases, that's what we were doing. Or, you know, venting or talking to your single friends who, might make it seem like, well, why are you even doing that? It sounds hard. And like, that's not what I need to hear. It's not helpful, because they just can't share in the experience. So we actually, in our agreements, added who are we both comfortable and trust that the other goes to for relationship advice. And that felt really like a point of us both really protecting us and taking really good care of us by making that choice.
I love that. I think that's excellent advice, because there's so much of that happening, you know, where people are selling relationship advice, but they don't have good relationships, or they're not even in a relationship, and money advice and all of that. So I love that one. And we also have in our agreements, Lance and I, that, you know, we don't really go to people for advice who don't understand that everything is a story. Right? Because I'm a great storyteller and I'm very compelling. So I do not need to tell my story to somebody who's going to be like, oh my gosh, he does sound like an asshole.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I need somebody who's going to love me and say, that sounds really painful. And are you ready to clear it? You know?
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly right. And to be really clear, because what you said, there are, I mean, a lot of coaches in various industries. And it's not that I need someone to be having the experience that I want right now, but even if they have had it. So like, I'm not going to judge someone. If someone is divorced, I'm not going to be like, well, can't take relationship advice from them if they've been in a partnership like mine or similar.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. If they've taken the medicine, right? If they've taken the medicine, that's what you want.
That's exactly right. So yeah. Those are kind of my gems on relationships. Was there anything else?
Well, I love that. And I knew you would speak that way about it, which is why I set you up for Mr. Wonderful. Because I think it's so easy to give our power away to like, oh, if I just attract Mr. Wonderful, then I'll be saved. Right. And what I want everybody to be feeling into is like, it's still a journey. You're still going to be in the driver's seat. You're still going to be working your stuff. You're still going to have experiences, and some will feel good and some will not feel good. And it's not about reaching some finish line. It's about living your life in your essence, in your beingness right here where you are. Right. And I think you can feel that with Liz. You can feel how alive she is in the moment. And there's this like curiosity and innocence and joie de vivre, you know, about just being.
Yeah. And you know what I want to say too? It's really important to just remove all the pedestals. I've done this before. Put a partner on a pedestal. Just thought they were like smarter than me or better than me, and then that was a really like sneaky way. I gave away my power. I put my partner in the position of teacher, and that can go both ways. Even there are some times when Mike asks me stuff, and I'm like, "Why are you asking me that? Like, how do you feel about it?" And I think that's important because, you know, again, I think this is some programming. I think, you know, that idea that a relationship, a partner completes us.
Yes.
That's heinous.
Yes.
And it's cool sometimes to relax into your partner, to let them hold you, to be able to just like melt and be like, please, just take care of me today.
Right.
But that can't be the thing all the time. We need to take care of our own selves.
Yeah. And I think taking the relationship itself off the pedestal is what I was hearing you say at the beginning, is like that the relationship is something that completes your life, or that is the missing ingredient, or, yeah, it's just a thing. It's just another expression of your essence. What's happening there is just an expression of how clear or not clear you are,
Yeah, and talk about, projections go both ways. There's negative and there's positive. And so to not take either too personally. Because since we are both coaches and we have online brands, like we have our own fans, and then there are fans of our relationship, which just feels like a ridiculous thing to say, but it's just true. Like we have people asking us all the time, when are you going to do something together? Oh my God, like you guys are the best. And I was on a coaching call one day, and I was sharing an experience that related to something someone was going through. And she said, oh, it's nice to know that even perfect life coach couples have issues too. And I'm like, if by perfect you mean human, yes, we absolutely, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like that's the responsibility. That's actually why I created this radio show, because what I could see about my own ego is, in the past, I would start to get some followers, and then I would start to think that I need to have it more figured out than I have it. Right. And so, and it was like, okay, how can I not drink my own Kool-Aid? And this show is that. This show is like, I just show up and lay my ego down, and whatever's happening happens. And it's, this is totally not my way. Like, I'm an introvert. I don't like sharing stuff about myself. I don't like, I don't like being in process publicly. And also it's required. It's required because this is how we're chipping away at the old belief that, we get a beautiful snapshot of Liz and Mike and they live happily ever after,
right. Right. And actually something I've been stewing on lately, and I sent myself a voice memo on my phone so I could remember to write about this, was I've seen a lot of posts about social media recently of people kind of talking about the way people only share the highlight reel, or they only share the good stuff and not the bad stuff. And my question to that is, why is that not okay? Why would I want to be putting more energy and attention on the things happening in my life that I don't want?
Well, I love the question. I was having the same inquiry this morning because it's been a while since I posted on Facebook, and I was feeling like, what is my aversion to posting? And so I have this aversion that if I post like, the happy shot of my medicine drum that I birthed last weekend, that people think like, oh my gosh, all she does is amazing, ceremony and creation. And it's like, what's missing in that snapshot is all of the other stuff I did. I went to the bathroom. I fought with my husband. I didn't work out. You know what I mean? And so there's like this egoic response to like attaching to, so it's not the post itself that's bad. It's the egoic attachment to the post, right? That thinks like, oh, if I only had those series of snapshots, my life would look like I imagine her life looks like, Right. And so I'm not sure of the answer, because I agree. It's not like, I was trying to think, well, how can I communicate the fact that I have this whole life in between snapshots? And, it's like, I don't know. I just feel like that's part of us beginning to be more seated in the throne of ourselves, where we become like less interested in the snapshots of everyone else's lives. So I'm interested, kind of, Liz, like I saw a couple things on your website, but I couldn't tell you what you've been up to over the last 6 months per se. And I'm cool with that. And I know you're cool with that.
Yeah. And I'm extra. So two things. First of all, I love what you just said, life in between snapshots. I want you to take that and run with it and write a freaking post about that. And if I ever use that term, I'm giving you full credit.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, every once in a while I will mention something, or even when I post about Mike, I'll be like, man, like this guy, I love him so much and he's the biggest pain in my ass. Like I'll insert a sentence to just let people know, like, yeah, it's not all like rainbow sunshine unicorns and rolling around on our bed and $20,000.
Right.
But the second part of that was, crap, this happens to me. This has been happening to me a lot lately. I forgot the second part. What did you say?
I don't know. Did I say something?
I know. What did you say right before I just said that last thing? Do you remember?
I was saying it's the light between the snapshots. And so, when we'll stop when we start to get more seated in ourselves. So then, we won't care so much.
Right. And that's exactly right. And I think one of the most damaging things about social media is it creates artificial connection. Yeah. Because I might be able to go to your Facebook page and scroll through and see what you were up to, but I didn't actually have to talk to you to know that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not picking up the phone. I'm not getting on Skype with you. I can just go, oh, what's Jody up to? Great. I know everything I need to know. And I didn't even have to actually, genuinely, in a real way, connect with you.
Yes. Yes, and you connected with, so the artificial you who was searching for something online connected with the edited part of me, right? And now we think we know something.
Super damaging.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get this too. It's also really interesting when you meet people and they think they know you.
Yeah.
Or even weirder is people who feel like they have any entitlement to like speak to you or like ask you things. And this was a nice little wake-up call for me. Several weeks ago, I had someone leave a comment on one of my Instagram photos that said, hey, Liz, like, are you still with Mike? Sorry if this is an inappropriate question, but I just haven't seen any pictures of you in a while. And my response was something along the lines of, yeah, lately we've been exercising extra privacy with our relationship, which clearly I need to. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then that person responded with like, oh, I didn't realize you were such a smart ass, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I mean, I just didn't engage. I didn't respond back. But it was like, well, clearly I created a situation where you felt like it was okay to ask me that question. So clearly I do need to exercise a little more privacy. So it was just funny. I was like, oh, good to know.
Yeah. And I think that is a good inquiry for all of us to be in around social media, which is like, what is our point? What do we stand for? Why are we doing this? Is there an energetic that we can shift that actually, because I do think it's a beautiful, useful tool. I mean, here we are, talking to all these beautiful women listening and, that's how you and I met and, all of those pieces. So it's just like, but there is a shadow as with everything. And so I think it's worth paying attention to, what are we doing? Always.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay. So here we are at the top of the hour. I want to wrap up and I want to just, I'd like to have both of us just settle into ourselves and, everyone listening, same, right? So settle into yourself and see what is the nugget here for you? What is the wisdom you're taking away? And then, Liz, I'd like to just offer if there's any last piece you want to offer or sum up or reiterate, and then I'll see if there's anything I have.
I'm just feeling super appreciative for you and who you are and how easy it is to really connect with you and chat with you. And I know you're not a person that I've spent a ton of time with or that we even connect that often. And I think it's just such an amazing demonstration of quality over quantity. I feel like whenever we come together, it's just like deep and amazing. And there will be pieces of this conversation for me that just continue to reverberate for weeks to come. And I really, really like appreciate and honor that about you. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel the same. Yeah, I love how you phrased that too. It's beautiful. And so what I would like to say by way of wrapping up is the temple. The temple wanted to be spoken of again. And, what I feel is I love that Liz is another example of someone who is fiercely in her own temple and tending her own space and her own beingness, and with such irreverence. Because again, we don't want to drink the Kool-Aid of, our temple must be sacred and it must be, quiet and PC and, all of that. And it's like, this is an invitation for you to really get in with yourself and feel like what is true for you as you're building that temple brick by brick and form by form, what actually is alive and true and running through you so that your temple can be an expression of your own divine essence. And yours may be softer or louder or, more colorful or more black and white, right? It could be all kinds of things and you won't know until you go in and take a look. So thank you. Thank you, Liz, for being yet another mirror for all of us to see ourselves and to heed the call to go more in.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right. Well, that will do it for this week. And if you want to get our initiation series, you can do that at WSMRinitiation.com. There are 5 audios there that are a great start if you're just listening in on the radio show and kind of want to get up to speed. WSMRinitiation.com. And if you want to play with Liz and I over in the tribe, you can do that for free. It's facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe. Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe. So you can ask Liz any questions over there, and we'll continue this conversation after the show. All right. So until next time, bye for now.
We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination, for God's sake. A revelation, for God's sake. An inspiration, for God's sake. Illumination, for God's sake. For God's sake. For God's sake. For God.